My mom sold my car to pay for my sister's wedding €1. I found the receipt. Imagine waking up on an ordinary morning, grabbing your car keys off the hook by the door, and walking outside €1, and your car simply isn't there. Not stolen. Not towed. Just gone. Now imagine asking your mother where it is, and getting nothing back but silence. A pause that lasts 1 second too long. That happened to me. But the car disappearing wasn't even the worst part of this story. The worst part was finding out, days later, that my own mother had sold it. Without asking me. Without telling me. Without a single word of warning. And when I finally found the receipt €1, hidden in a folder I was never supposed to see €1, the name written on it changed everything I thought I understood about my family. If you're watching this video, do not click away, because this story does not end where you think it's going to end. There are turns in this story that even I didn't see coming while they were happening to me. So settle in, because we're starting from the very beginning. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, go ahead and subscribe, because this is exactly the kind of content we cover €1, real family drama, real betrayal, and the kind of twist that makes you rewatch a video just to catch what you missed. Every name in this story has been changed to protect privacy. But every event, every conversation, every emotion €1, all of it is real. This is something I sat on for a long time before I ever felt ready to share it in full. Today is that day. By the end of this video, you're going to see how one single car exposed cracks in my entire family that had been hiding under the surface for years. How I discovered I had been lied to quietly for months. And a twist near the end that, honestly, I still think about to this day. Get comfortable. Grab your coffee, your tea, whatever it is you're sipping on right now, because this one is long, and it's worth the ride. For this video, let's call me Ashley. 3 people sit at the center of the story: my mother, my younger sister €1, who I'll call Sarah €1, and me. My father passed away several years ago after a long illness. I won't go into all of the details of that time, because honestly, it deserves its own video. But what matters here is this. After he passed, a lot of the emotional and financial weight of our household shifted onto me and my mother. I was working full-time by then. Sarah was still in college, and my mother did her best juggling grief, bills, and 2 daughters who were both, in different ways, struggling to hold things together. I want to be clear about something before I go further. This is not a story where I paint my mother as some kind of villain from the very beginning. She raised us largely on her own after my father died. She worked long hours. She sacrificed more than I probably even know. I say all of this because what happened later doesn't erase any of that €1, it complicates it. And that complexity is exactly why this story stayed with me the way it did. When I was 24, after 3 years of saving every spare dollar from my first real job, I finally bought a car. It wasn't new. It wasn't flashy. But it was mine, bought with my own money, registered in my own name, and it represented something much bigger than transportation. It represented the first thing I had ever built entirely on my own, without help, without a loan from family, without anyone bailing me out. Every single weekend, without fail, I would wash that car by hand in the driveway. I'd vacuum the inside, wipe down the dashboard, check the tire pressure €1, all of it. My mother used to stand at the door watching me and laugh, saying, "You treat that car like it's your child." I used to laugh it off. But looking back now, she wasn't entirely wrong. Then, about a year later, Sarah got engaged. I remember the night she told us. We were all in the kitchen, and she was practically glowing. My mother cried happy tears. I hugged her so tight, I nearly knocked the ring off her finger. For a few weeks, everything in our house felt lighter than it had in years. But happiness, as I would learn, doesn't pay for weddings. And once the actual planning started, one uncomfortable truth surfaced fast. We simply did not have the money this wedding was going to require. In the beginning, the tension in the house felt normal. Every family I know goes through some version of wedding stress €1, vendors calling, budgets shifting, relatives adding opinions nobody asked for. I told myself that's all this was. But looking back, there were signs. Small ones at first, easy to explain away individually, but impossible to ignore once I lined them all up. The first sign, my mother started asking about my bank balance in a way she never had before. Not in a casual, how's work going kind of way, in a specific, pointed way. How much do you have saved right now? Do you have any large expenses coming up? I answered honestly each time, never once suspecting why she was asking. The second sign, the wedding budget kept growing almost every week, and nobody could clearly explain where the extra money to cover it was coming from. When I asked, I got vague answers. We're figuring it out. Don't worry about it. It'll work out. The third sign is the one that, in hindsight, should have told me everything. One evening my mother sat me down and said, very casually, don't drive your car for a little while. We're taking it in for some maintenance. I didn't think twice about it. I said okay, handed over an extra set of keys when she asked for them, and went about my week assuming it was exactly what she said it was. Then, one evening, I came home from work later than usual. I pulled into the driveway, walked up toward the garage to grab something I'd left inside and the garage was empty. Not car parked somewhere else in the driveway, empty. Completely empty. My stomach dropped in a way I can still feel if I think about it too hard. I ran inside. Mom? Where's my car? She was in the kitchen, back turned to me, washing dishes. Without turning around, she said, it'll be back soon, sweetheart. It's still at the mechanic. Something about the way she said it, flat, rehearsed almost didn't sit right with me. But she was my mother. The woman who raised me. I trusted her completely. It genuinely did not cross my mind, not even for a second, that she was capable of hiding something like this from me. 3 days passed. No car. Every single time I brought it up, the answer shifted slightly. Just a couple more days. They found another issue with it. You know how mechanics are, they're always backed up. I want to be honest with you, a part of me, deep down, started to feel uneasy. But I pushed that feeling down every time it surfaced, because the alternative explanation felt impossible. My mother, lying to my face day after day, it didn't fit the person I thought I knew. I even offered to call the mechanic myself, just to check on the progress. My mother very quickly said, no, I've got it handled, don't worry about it. At the time, I told myself she was just trying to spare me the hassle. Looking back now, I realized she was trying to keep two separate stories from colliding. By day 4, I wasn't just uneasy anymore. I was suspicious enough to start looking for answers on my own. On the 4th day, I was digging through a kitchen drawer where we kept miscellaneous paperwork, old warranty cards, appliance manuals, that kind of thing, looking for an old maintenance record for my car that I wanted to hand over to the mechanic myself. Instead, I found a folder I had never seen before, tucked behind a stack of unopened mail. At first, I assumed it was wedding-related paperwork, contracts with vendors, maybe a venue deposit slip. I almost put it back without looking. But something made me open it anyway. Inside was a sale receipt. For a car. My car. My name was listed as the registered owner. But underneath that, in a section labeled seller, was my mother's signature, next to a line that read authorized seller/guardian. The car had already been sold. Days before she'd even told me it was at the mechanic. The sale amount was written clearly at the bottom of the page. And right behind that receipt, in the very same folder, was a second piece of paper, a running list titled Wedding Expenses, with numbers that lined up almost exactly with the amount from the sale. My hands started shaking. I remember having to sit down on the kitchen floor because my legs genuinely did not feel steady enough to hold me. This wasn't just about losing a car. It was about the fact that my mother had made a decision that huge, that permanent, about something that belonged to me, and then looked me in the eye, more than once, and lied about it. I sat there for what felt like a long time, just staring at that receipt, trying to figure out what to do with what I now knew. Eventually, I stood up, folder in hand, and started walking toward my mother's room to confront her directly. I didn't have a plan. I just knew I couldn't sit with this alone for one more hour. On the way there, I passed by the kitchen again, and I heard Sarah's voice coming from the living room. She was on the phone, laughing about something, and I almost kept walking. But then I caught a piece of the conversation that made me stop completely. She said, "Yeah, Mom sold my sister's car, so the budget's basically fixed now. Just don't say anything. She doesn't know yet." I stood frozen in the hallway. Sarah knew. Not just knew after the fact €1. She had known about this the entire time it was happening. While I was being told stories about mechanics and delays, my own sister was on the phone laughing about how our wedding budget problem had been solved. I felt something shift in my chest in that moment that was almost harder to process than finding the receipt itself. My mother lying to me was one thing. But Sarah €1, my sister, the person I had driven to school events, covered shifts for, lent money to more times than I could count €1, had also chosen to stay silent and let it happen. I stood there in that hallway for a long moment, the folder still in my hand, genuinely unsure which door to knock on first. I chose my mother's room first. I walked in without knocking and placed the folder, open to the receipt, directly on the small table beside her bed. "Mom, what is this?" Her face changed the second she saw it. All the colors seemed to drain out of it at once. There was a long silence before she finally said, quietly, "I was going to tell you." "When?" I asked. My voice was shaking, but I kept going. "Next time I asked to drive it? Next time I asked when the mechanic would be done." She started crying. Not the composed, controlled kind of crying €1, real, overwhelmed tears. "The wedding costs got out of control, Ashley. The in-laws kept adding demands. The venue raised their price at the last minute, and I didn't know what else to do. I thought you'd understand, eventually." "Mom, you never gave me the chance to understand anything. You never asked me. That car was mine. Years of saving, years of work, and you took it and hid it from me like I wouldn't notice." That's when Sarah walked in, drawn, I think, by the sound of raised voices. I turned to her immediately. "Did you know about this?" She looked at the floor. A long pause. Then, quietly, "Yes. I knew. I was scared to tell you." I remember the room going completely silent after that. Not a peaceful silence, €1, a heavy one. Years of trust between the three of us, undone in the space of about 90 seconds, over a single piece of paper. I asked them both the same question, one after another. Was there ever a moment, any moment at all, where either of you considered just asking me? Neither of them had an answer. I couldn't stay in that house that night. I packed an overnight bag and left, telling them only that I needed space. I drove €1, well, technically, my mother drove me, since I no longer had a car €1, to my best friend's apartment across town. I told her everything, start to finish, sitting on her kitchen floor with a cup of tea going cold beside me. She listened without interrupting, which I was grateful for, because I don't think I could have handled advice in that moment. I just needed to say it all out loud to someone who wasn't involved. At one point she asked me the question I hadn't let myself ask yet, "Do you think this is really just about the wedding?" I didn't have an answer for her that night, but that question stuck with me. I didn't sleep much that first night, or honestly for several nights after. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, turning it over from every angle. Was this really only about money? Or did it mean something deeper, €1, that in my own house, my needs, my ownership over my own things, simply mattered less than everyone else's? I love my mother. I want to say that clearly, because this story isn't really about stopping loving someone. It's about learning, sometimes painfully, that love and respect are not automatically the same thing. Someone can love you deeply and still make a decision that crosses a line they had no right to cross. A few days later, I told my mother that until this was resolved €1 fairly, and honestly €1, I wasn't going to be involved in any family financial matters going forward. No more contributing to shared expenses. No more being the one who figured it out when money got tight. Sarah apologized to me directly more than once. I appreciated it, but I'll be honest with you, €1, in that moment, the words didn't feel like nearly enough to undo what had happened. I want to pause here and ask you something, because I'm genuinely curious. If you were in my position right now, having just found that receipt, having just heard your sister on the phone, €1, what would you have done differently? Would you have confronted them the same way or handled it differently? Drop that in the comments, because I read every single one, and I want to know how the story is landing with you so far. About a week after the confrontation, I decided I needed more than just an apology. I needed to actually understand where the money had gone, in full, because the numbers in that folder never quite added up to me. The wedding, as far as I could tell from talking to vendors directly, wasn't costing nearly as much as the amount my car had sold for. So I started asking questions. Quietly, carefully, without telling my mother or Sarah what I was doing. I called the venue directly and asked, under the pretense of helping coordinate final payments, what the total balance was. The number they gave me was significantly lower than what I expected, based on the wedding expenses sheet I'd found in that folder. I called the caterer. Same thing, €1, a smaller number than expected. Something wasn't lining up. If the full amount from my car hadn't gone entirely to the wedding, where had the rest of it gone? About a week after I started quietly digging, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer it, but something told me to pick up. It was a man's voice. Polite but hesitant. He introduced himself as the person who had bought my car. "I hope this isn't strange," he said, "but your mother mentioned you already knew about the sale, and I just wanted to confirm the paperwork went through fine on your end. But there's something you might not know." My chest tightened immediately. "What is it?" He paused, like he wasn't sure whether to say it. "The payment I made, €1, it wasn't paid in full to your mother directly. Half of it was wired to a different account. She asked me to split it that way as part of the deal." I felt my whole body go still. "Who is the account under?" He gave me a name. A name I had never heard before in my entire life. Not a relative. Not a family friend. Not anyone who had ever come up in any conversation, any holiday dinner, any photo album in 26 years of being part of this family. I sat with that name for a long moment after we hung up, just staring at the wall, trying to place it somewhere, anywhere, in my memory. Nothing came up. That night, I didn't confront anyone right away. Instead, I did something I probably should have done from the very beginning, €1. I searched the name online. What I found was limited, but enough to raise even more questions than I already had. A public profile, a city listed that wasn't far from where we used to live years ago, back before my father passed away. Nothing that explained, on its own, why this person would be receiving half the money from the sale of my car. I thought about asking Sarah first, since she'd already proven she knew more than she originally let on. But something told me this particular thread led somewhere different, €1, somewhere that had nothing to do with the wedding at all. I thought about my father. I thought about the years before he passed, the parts of that time that were never really explained to me or Sarah in detail, the way adults sometimes shield kids from things for their own good, even when those kids have long since grown up. I started to wonder if this wasn't really a story about a wedding, or even about a car. I started to wonder if this was a story about something my mother had been carrying quietly for a very long time. A few days later, I sat my mother down again. This time, I didn't come in with anger the way I had the first time. I came in with a name. I placed a printed page in front of her with just that one name written on it, and I asked her, as calmly as I could manage, "Who is this, and why did half the money from my car go to them?" Her reaction told me everything before she said a single word. Her hands started trembling. She looked, for the first time in this entire story, not just guilty, but afraid. "Where did you get that name?" she asked quietly. "That doesn't matter right now. I need you to tell me the truth. All of it. Not just about the car." There was a long silence. Long enough that I genuinely wasn't sure she was going to answer at all. Finally, she said, "That's a conversation I never wanted to have with you. Not like this. I want to be completely honest with you about something." What my mother told me next changed the way I understood my entire childhood, my father, and this family, in a way that I genuinely was not prepared for. But that conversation is long, it's emotional, and it deserves its own full video rather than being rushed into the last 2 minutes of this one. So here's where I want to bring you into this. Based on everything you've heard so far, €1, the car, the receipt, my sister's silence, the mystery payment, the unfamiliar name €1, what do you think is actually going on in this family? Drop your theory in the comments below. I promise you, some of you are going to be closer to the truth than you think, and some of you are going to be way off in a direction I never expected either. A few questions I genuinely love your thoughts on. 1. Do you think my mother's decision to sell the car, even setting aside everything else, was ever justified? 2. Does Sarah's silence deserve forgiveness, knowing what you know now? 3. Who do you think that name belongs to, and how do you think they're connected to my family? If you want to hear exactly what my mother told me next day euro, the real reason behind that second payment, and the secret that reshaped how I see my entire family euro, make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on, because part 2 is coming. And it goes further than anything in this video. This story is far from over. The biggest twist is still ahead of us. I'll see you in the next one.